While we're waiting to get the audio, let me introduce the speakers. We have three very interesting speakers today. They're all calling in from Cairo, and they all work for a program called SEED, which stands for Strengthening Entrepreneurship and Enterprise Development, and it's a USAID program. And they're going to be talking about the process of restructuring that program or retrofitting a market systems development approach to that program, which is working with micro, small and medium enterprises. The speakers will be Ron Ashkin, who is the Chief of Party for that program, and Dalia Molla, who is the team lead, and Iman Elibyary, apologies Iman for my pronunciation, Elibyary, who is the senior advisor for their M&E team. Now, let me see, have we got the audio set from Cairo come through yet?
Hi, Mike.
Excellent.
I think we're good.
We are good. I can hear you, Ron, although you're a little bit faint. If there's any way to up the volume on your microphone.
I think that's about as good as we can get, unfortunately.
Okay, it's probably me. I need to turn up the volume on my speakers. Ron, I hope I did you justice and your colleagues justice with my introductions. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Well, why don't I hand over straight away to you?
Great. Thank you, Mike. And thanks to Isabel Gore for helping us arrange all of this. This is Ron Ashkin. I'm Chief of Party on USAID's SEED project in Egypt. As Mike said, we're calling in from Cairo, and I'm joined by Dalia Molla, who's our team lead for the value chain linkages component, and Iman Elibyary, who's our lead for M&E. We're going to talk about a large multi-sector program in Egypt that just wasn't achieving its intended impact and what we've done about it. So hello out there in television land and greetings from Cairo. So Dalia and Iman, would you like to say hi?
Hi, hello everyone, this is Iman.
Hi, this is Dalia Molla, team lead for value chain integration.
And as Mike said, you can put your questions in the chat box and he'll moderate questions after we get done with the presentation. Let's go ahead and proceed. First, I have to start with the disclaimer. We're employees of AECOM International Development, and these are our views. They're not necessarily the views of USAID or the United States government. Let me tell you a bit about the SEED program. SEED stands for Strengthening Entrepreneurship and Enterprise Development. It's part of USAID's Trade and Investment Promotion in Egypt program, which is called TYPE. And the government partner is the Ministry of Trade and Industry. The program focuses on strengthening micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, and entrepreneurship. It's a broad multi-sector project with a large urban population. The base period is 2015 through 2018, and there's an option for an additional year. We have a staff of 60 based in Cairo. It's split about 2/3 technical and 1/3 operations. And the objective of the program is to increase employment and income of MSMEs and entrepreneurs. So basically, those are our impact objectives. The project's structured into 4 components. First, entrepreneurship skills and opportunities. In our contract, it's called Component A. Second, financial and non-financial services, Component B. And I often question, other than financial and non-financial services, what other kind of services are there? Component C is integration of MSMEs into value chains, and Dalia, who's our second presenter, leads that component. And finally, we have cross-cutting support units. Basically, what we have there, other than M&E, is an IT component, an enabling environment component, a gender component, a marketing component, and there's a tiny, tiny grants component. Now, what are we going to talk about today? The basic problem that we're addressing is that the contract we work under mandates payment by results. Now, that's a good thing, and I think many, many contemporary development contracts are structured for payment by results. The problem is the way the contract is actually set up. The fixed fee in our contract is paid against the achievement of 39 prescribed performance standards. And they're primarily inputs and outputs. So basically, even though it's payment by results, most of the results we get paid against are actually inputs. And actually, there's no room for failure. It's basically an all or none set of performance standards. And also, while there's an overall theory of change, which is rather vague, there's no logic linking the individual interventions to the higher level program objectives. So the performance standards are mostly inputs and outputs, and the program objectives are clearly impact objectives. And although the overall theory of change sounds nice, the individual interventions do not have clear links. So what are the performance implications? The project largely accomplished its input and output targets in its first 2 years, but the higher level indicators were lagging. And as a result, the funding agency was concerned. And let me give you just a bit of context. There's no precedent for broad-scale market systems development programming in Egypt. So most everything here is either government support or direct intervention. There's almost no facilitative program. So what do we do about it? Two main initiatives. One is to retrofit an adaptive market systems development approach to the technical interventions and have logic tying input to impact. And second, we adopted the DCD standard for results measurement. So what are the steps we went through? The big steps you'll see on the slide. First, we had to analyze the intervention logic for the 50 or so existing interventions. So the 39 performance standards had become about 50 interventions on the ground. But again, there were no results chains for them. So we had to analyze the logic and draft results chains for each, all of them leading to the same impact objectives. And then we had to do measurement plans for each. Second, we had to look at value for money on top of the impact. And then we rated the interventions on strength of logic and value for money. And I'll show you how we did that a bit later. So again, the performance standards were there as a trigger for payment, but with no logic linking input to impact, we didn't know which were the good ones, which were the bad ones. And again, the budget wasn't necessarily tied to the degree of impact. So we did an analysis of that at the end of last year. After that exercise, we had the opportunity to design new, more impactful interventions that actually did match both the contract scope and the objectives. I think Dalia can talk about that, because a lot of them were in her components. Next, we had to reorient our work approach. We had to retrain staff on market systems development, or M4P. We had to introduce new processes and tools. And next, we had to realign the budget, because again, the budget was not tied to value for money or level of impact. And last, we introduced a new monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan, and a new interface between our technical components and M&E. So let me show you a couple of the tools, and those of you who have worked with before have seen these because they're really evolution, they're not revolution. Because there were no results chains and staff primarily were novices in market systems development, we had to get this done quickly. So we introduced a worksheet, which I call the cheat sheet. It basically just plotted out what we mean by each step of the results chain and had boxes for the engagement managers to write out their logic in text and to recommend measurements for each step. So the first input step basically answered the question, what does the project do for the partner? The output step, what capacity does the partner gain? What are they able to do now because of intervention? Outcome, what behavior change happens in the marketplace can be attributed to our systems. And finally, impact. What's the economic result for the target group in terms of employment and income group? So we did this for more than 50 interventions. Then we rated our interventions. Oh, the line I just put in there, that just shows where the market steps in and we step out. So again, as a facilitated project now, we only do inputs. In terms of rating interventions, we came up with just a matrix that rated strength of logic either weak, moderate, or strong, and value for money either low, medium, or high. Then we did matrix arithmetic and a traffic signal system showing green for strong, amber for moderate, and red for low. You can see how that works. So basically, something that had strong strength of logic and medium value for money would get a 6, so it'd still be rated high impact overall. Obviously, something that had weak logic and low value for money, we'd give a red. We didn't want to pay much attention to this. Now, how do we evaluate strength of logic? There's a lot of cells in this matrix, and I'll just put it up here. And I think the PowerPoint will be available on the Beam website after the webinar. But we actually came up with a scorecard for strength of logic, so it wasn't just I think it's good or I think it's bad. So we gave numerical scores 1, 2, 3 for weak, moderate, or strong logic. And as you can see, for example, reaching outcome level after more than a year would get a 1, under 1 year would get a 2, and within 3 to 6 months would get a 3. Inputs, if our inputs are funding only, it would get a 1. If we only organize events or funded procurements. Something that was a mix of funding and TA would get a 2, and something that was all TA would get a 3. So it just gives you an example of how we rated logic. And again, we'd sum up the rows and come with an overall score. So that's how we rated our interventions. Let me talk a bit about the training tools and staffing. What steps did we go through? First, we had to do an intervention logic workshop and then a 2-day retreat for all technical staff. So people that were just being introduced to intervention logic and results chains were able to do it in a workshop format. So we spent a total of 3 days together doing this, and everyone took their interventions offline to complete them. We did an intensive 3-day M4P training. There was 1 day of theory, 1 day of tools, and 1 day of application, again for all staff. We introduced a new toolkit. The basic elements were an intervention dashboard for management and a SharePoint cloud file sharing system, a process flow, a screening tool for relevance, impact, engagement, do no harm, a template for a concept note that framed our interventions. It included the results chain cheat sheet, and included things like partner roles and responsibilities, budgets, timelines. There's an M4P check in there to make sure we're complying with basic principles. We introduced a standard measurement plan template and action plan template. And finally, we reoriented the workflow. Basically went from using a lot of international consultants to a larger Egyptian staff and more reliance on in-house expertise and Egyptian nationals. I'd say we went from hiring consultants to being consultants. But I'd like to turn the floor over to Dalia now, and she's going to talk about the value chain.
For the value chain, for the value chain of componency, it's totally related to the integration of SME into bigger and larger value chain. And I'm going to introduce our definition or our component using the market system donut. To simply demonstrate how we are working. The core of our work is related to supply and demand. This is the 2 parts of the equation. We are affecting and affected by both. We are currently, or during the start of the project, we are working through 5 sectors, mainly the plastic sector, the ready-made garments, the automotive, the feeding industries, and dairy and fisheries. They are very different from each other, and the mentality, even the SMEs, are totally different from each other. And of course, the environment and the ecosystem and the stakeholders are also different. This donut represents how we really function because it's really affecting our interventions and the way we design it. We are affected by the supporting functions and the infrastructure for each sector and the information dissemination, improving the skills and technology of each sector and any related services. In the same time, we are affected by the standards and regulation and the policy and rules and those regarding any industry within the 5 sectors. So while designing our interventions, we do care about this ecosystem. Here I want to show the difference between the way we used to act and the current one. For the beneficiaries, through the conventional development approach, our beneficiaries are passive. They need outside help. So they are always waiting for our support without any design or smart design to their needs. Currently, after what Ron already said about designing logic behind what are doing, putting an input output till we reach a real impact, we redesign the situation that we already analyze the market needs, analyze the beneficiary needs, and we come up with a smart solution and to actually serve these beneficiaries, especially the SMEs that in the sectors we are dealing with. Another big key is the private sector engagement. These are the main key because large corporates before don't have a clear initiative to support the development of SMEs. But currently, through our technical expertise, internal technical expertise, because we already have a different expertise within the team, they have direct engagement with large buyers like General Motors and Nissan. Telecom Egypt is the biggest consumer of the plastic buyers in Egypt, and Clorox is the biggest consumer of plastic for household products. So we are contacting with the biggest buyers in the 5 sectors for bigger impact. As for sustainability, it wasn't that important. We were searching for achieving our target, but currently using the new market system approach, it's mandatory during our intervention design. As for the assistance provided, it was as requested by most of the beneficiaries. They were targeting cash, although it's not our objective. So we redesigned their needs into tailored technical assistance like matchmaking, B2B events, exhibitions, sales and marketing training, backward and forward integration, capacity building programs. As for the impact and scale, it was short-term and limited, unstable, sustainable impact. And currently, after redesigning the logic behind what we are doing and the intervention chain, it's become permanent and scalable. As for the challenges we are already facing during this shift, of course, there are resistance between our market players, starting from the suppliers and the intermediate organizations that serve the suppliers and even the buyers. It's not easy to change the logic to receive technical assistance instead of cash. Redesigning the intervention model, it needs, of course, more time and maybe another budget. And we were suffering from limited budget and the time at the same time because it's a limited time project. So the redesign of the intervention, it was another challenge. Creating plan B scenarios and creating another added value interventions with limited budget, it's another scenario and another challenge. Of course, the engagement or gaining the engagement and the commitment of both the buyers and suppliers and the intermediate organization and get out of it with a higher impact is another challenge. And of course, the budget reallocation according to the redesigned interventions. For the solution, we already, as mentioned, we and the team already searched for the best partners to engage and the best sustainable partner to engage in our intervention, and develop non-cash incentives that make the SMEs see the carrot from behind what we are doing towards them and see the map and see the road towards their success and the improvement of their revenues and so forth. Of course, showing them a sustainable portfolio creation, it's another tool that we use. So showing them success stories that we already implemented, this really helped a lot. Of course, seeing the map and seeing the roadmap, this is very important, setting the objectives and targets and so forth. eliminate, during our redesign, we already eliminated non-impactful activities which were costing money and at the same time wasting time and not giving that much impact. It was totally eliminated from our plan. One of the case example I would like to mention is a matchmaking procurement and market information system development for the plastic chamber in the biggest umbrella of industries, which is the Federation of Egyptian Industries. They already were having a very normal Excel sheet that includes only some data, non-organized data about the suppliers of the plastic. We offered them to redesign the whole situation and to provide for them to be able to provide better service for the members. We provided them with a matchmaking program, one-to-many and many-to-many program, one-to-many through one supplier, one buyer to many suppliers, and many-to-many through an exhibition through which the SMEs can provide their products and show their products to other different buyers. So it was another source of revenue for the plastic chamber, and it was a different intervention that really had created a good impact. Also, at the same time, transforming from a very simple Excel sheet that contained very primitive data to a highly dynamic MIS system that serves both the supplier and buyers to create an online shop, an online payment deal. This was a great transform to the organization. And of course, it will have a high impact to the plastic suppliers and buyers. Of course, the new market system approach guarantees partner engagement, active market participant, and upgrade the services provided by a key and institutional stakeholder, which is the Federation of the Egyptian Industry. From the lesson learned from all this, that the market analysis is a really effective tool to know the needs and bottlenecks and the challenges that face any sector. Of course, we should target the areas that have no donor involvement. This should be very attractive and could absorb our interventions very easily. Stakeholder engagement is the key for high impact interventions. Also, development of integrated solutions to create better impacts. Not healthy to create one-point interventions. Should be integrated from the financial side and from the technical side to create a highly impact intervention at the end. This will be coming to Iman and her role.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well and enjoying the presentation. First, I will take you through the status of the project, how it was before since we started the restructuring for impact process, how it was, and what we did to actually tailor the tools and processes to create the change that we aspire to do. So at the beginning, as Ron referred in his slides, we had no solid theory of change. By no solid theory of change, we mean that the theory of change was detached from reality somehow in terms of linking whatever that we're doing on the ground to the higher impact related areas that we would like to actually achieve some targets in terms of revenue and impact. We had no clear methodologies on data collection, whether internally or with reports. We had no logical framework linking the indicators of the project to clear assumptions. We had no definitions to performance standards, nor performance indicators. And in addition to that, we had no emphasis on learning. The learning was actually a new part that we incorporated later on into the system. We had not enough tools to measure ongoing progress and no clear vision on attribution or project additionality. The first thing we actually did since we started the restructuring for impact process is that we actually developed the mill plan. The mill plan functions as the reference point for the systems and processes and tools that need to be in place in order to actually make our vision or our new market-focused project work. So what we did accordingly is that we linked the theory of change between the performance standards and the higher indicators, we created what Ron referred to as intervention logics and result chains to actually create this holistic but yet development hypothesis that is really related to whatever we are developing and implementing on the ground. We revised all project methodologies. We developed a logical framework in accordance with the key project assumptions as referred earlier. We defined all the performance standards and the performance indicators. We have very clear, detailed definitions now that might reach maybe 3 pages per each piece or performance indicator reference sheet to actually avoid any misconception, avoid any misunderstanding, any misinterpretation on the ground for any of our performance standards or performance indicators. By performance standards, I refer to the deliverables that we get paid for, and the performance indicators are the M&E indicators with the higher impact related indicators, which are the economic impact of the project. In addition to that, we embedded the learning into the mail plan, as I referred earlier, and introduced the DCED standards and the new attribution calculation that guarantees that whatever numbers are reported from the project are actually attributed to seed. I'll take you quickly through the challenges that some of them actually Ron referred to, but in here I will refer to in terms of lack of tools again, okay? So we had no link between the performance standards, which were mostly input and output related level deliverables. Of course, we have some of the deliverables that are related to the outcome level, but they're very rare compared to the remaining 39 deliverables, such as the establishment of one-stop shops or the establishment of incubators or any market-related activities. We had no emphasis on outcome, the market changes that need to take place, or impact-related areas. By impact-related areas, again, we mean the revenue and the employment, which are the higher impact areas of the project. The theory of change, as I explained earlier, was not linked in any way or form to the impact areas. Most seed interventions were on the output level, especially the deliverables, as I explained in my first point. What we did to actually encounter that is we started by creating the intervention logics and the measurement plans to tie whatever interventions that we have to do in order to get paid with the impact area that we need to reach. And of course, the lack of clear definitions for deliverables and indicators. Why are we stressing on those again? Last but not least, the stakeholder relationship. We had no actual M&E systems embedded with our stakeholders to actually qualify to gather the required data and evidence for the mission. So we started actually working very closely with our stakeholders to actually embed those systems in place to be able to capture whatever data needed. I believe we have a question on the M&E, but Mike will handle that. So the reason, again, why we're taking you through all the challenges, we want you to know the time and effort we put in place to actually encounter all those challenges. All of these challenges needed tools, needed thinking, needed in-depth meeting with technical teams and management and with stakeholders to actually make the new transformation into the restructuring happen smoothly. So the solutions, I'll go quickly through them as I explained already. We developed the measurement plans and the intervention logics. We updated the theory of change. All that is included in the mail plan. Conducted the in-depth technical meetings with the components, which take place on a regular basis, whether before implementation or during implementation or after in the follow-up phase or the evidence checkup phase. And we came up with the M&E component interface, which engages the M&E in all phases, starting with the planning of any intervention. And then we reviewed the deliverables against the higher indicators on a quarterly basis to actually be on track in terms of delays or numbers, because we want to measure that we're actually geared towards making the market changes we aspire to do. So we do that on a regular basis, and of course the development of the mill plan that we refer to. Applying the learning on and accountability on different project activities was one of the actually methods that enabled us to capture changes as they are happening in the market. Agreeing with stakeholders, as I mentioned earlier, on data required to be collected, and that was all evidence or data required from our project is already mentioned in most of the MOUs or the agreements between the partners. I'll take you here through the adaptive, again, the interface of the M&E. We use a methodology called the PDCA, which is the Plan, Do, and Check and Act. As I said, we engage with the project interventions from the planning phase, and then we do them, and then we actually check if they in coordinates and compliance with the contract or not, and then we act accordingly. And most of the acting part here actually is taking place during the learning activities. When we go back to the field and we sit with the stakeholders and with the teams, we come up with recommendations to actually put us on the right track in terms of doing more of what we're doing good, and actually maybe stop doing or prioritizing what we're doing good, and considering doing things differently and on what's not working. The DCD standard is basically everything we did is inspired by the DCD standard, starting from the result chain, the measuring changes and the attribution, capturing the changes that we do on the market level, and measuring the value for money for our projects. Like, for example, I will give an example on one of the interventions of component C. We already supported maybe 42 ready-made garment companies to engage in exhibitions. We paid around 400,000 EGP, but the return on investment, the money they made just during the exhibition time was almost 5,700,000 EGP, so that's considered a good money for investment. We started looking at things differently, and last but not least, reporting results in a reasonable and attributable manner. As I said, we ask very clear questions. What is the historic data that we have collected? Have we done any additional changes? Were the stakeholders going to do that with or without our support? What is it that we actually can be attributed to us 100%? The lessons learned, I already referred to that in most of my slides. When we linked the deliverables with the outcomes, and when we changed the theory of change, the market change already occurred on its own, because the focus was already geared towards the employment and revenue, and actually scaling up those businesses, making them more economically viable and applicable within the Egyptian market. Also, when it comes to learning, we have learned that by sharing the feedback with the teams and engaging from the planning phase, we reach better results. And last but not least, when applying the DCD standards, better technical ownership already takes place within the components and hopefully in the market. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of our formal presentation. I'm putting up our email contacts here if you'd like to contact us directly afterwards. But I'd like to thank Dalia and Iman for contributing. And at this point, participants can post their questions to us in the chat box, and Mike is going to moderate the question and answer periods. I see we have a few already, so we're waiting for your questions, and Mike at this point.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Ron, and thank you very much in particular, Dalia and Iman, for that very interesting presentation. As Ron said, we've had a few questions in advance, so let me just sort of fire away with a couple of them. Chris Masila is very keen to know how long this process of restructuring the program took, and perhaps whether you think there's any particular lessons that you've learned from that that might be relevant for people working in non-traditional sectors, Ron, like health or sanitation. And perhaps the second question that one of your colleagues could think about while you're answering that is what kind of simple tools can small micro-enterprises adopt to measure results that would contribute to the application or the use of the DCD standard?
Okay, I'll take the first one and I'll pass the second to Iman. Hi, Chris. Basically, we went through about a 6-month restructuring phase. You can't endlessly restructure. So the very first thing we did was kind of an internal brainstorming or problem definition to find out where the issues really were. And we did that pretty quickly and then designed the program at the beginning because we had to go through the rather complex steps that I enumerated during the presentation. We had to do everything from figuring out which interventions not only served our deliverables, but actually had logic and value for money. But we had to reorient the staff, train people that had no exposure to market systems development or results chains or DCD standards to actually use them day to day, and then introduce the tools. So it was confined to a 6-month period. Now this was 2 years into a 3-year base period. So we had to do it quickly as well because there's the possibility of an option at the end of the 3 years, but the funding agency is only going to exercise the option if they feel that they're getting sufficient value for money and having enough impact, on the ecosystem. So again, we decided not to prolong the restructuring and drag it out, but do it quickly so we could then have time to show some results, at least move up the results chains and give the funding agency incentive to see the future in market systems development. And again, all this in a context where it hasn't been done before in Egypt. So, yeah, about 6 months. Now, how does that apply to non-traditional sectors? This is a multi-sector program, and market system development is an approach, so it has to be adapted, not only to the sector, but also to the local economy or political economy, because Egypt's quite a bit different than Kenya, where I was working previously, in terms of the public-private interface particularly. But we didn't find anything restricting using the approach in any of our sectors. And then a lot of our program is not sector-specific. For example, in our component A, we're doing business incubation. Again, there are only, I believe, 2 of the 11 incubators we work with are really sector-specific. The others are just general business assistance. And again, in component B, which is services, we work across the industrial and non-industrial sectors. So it's really not sector-specific. So Iman, would you like to address the question about M&E tools that you've used?
Yeah, of course. I think to begin with, you have to have your impact areas that you need to hit related to the market that you're working with, to understand what are the key results that you need to achieve with your project or company or whatever. And then you start from the very basic tool of the DCED, the result chain work that starts by just the inputs, what you put in a business in terms of money, in terms of skills, in terms of efforts, and then what changes will come out of that in terms of knowledge and skills, and then the changes will occur how exactly in the market, what type of changes will occur because of this intervention or because of this product or service that you are providing, and then see if the impact related area, as we said, or the impact indicators are related somehow to the market changes that you aspire to achieve within your local or international market or whatever.
Thank you, Iman. That's very useful. I've got a sort of follow-up question that's relevant, so maybe you could stay on the microphone, from Dick Tinsley, who wants to know if you have specific targets for the various criteria that will distinguish success from failure.
Of course. I think it varies from a project to the other, or from a company to the other. It all comes from the place of understanding what actually identifies success to you. Is the fact that you launch is successful enough, or the fact that you sell and become active in the market, the fact that you actually improve your product or service, the fact that you go publicly well known, the revenues that you are generating, it all depends on the actual data and numbers that you are starting with as a project or as an idea. And then once you are economically viable and in the market, start putting a very simple quarterly plan to measure your progress using very simple tools. You don't have to be a genius or an expert in M&E to do that. Just know exactly what tells you that you are successful and what makes you unsuccessful or struggling within your own community or market.
Can you give us a practical example of a target from a particular intervention?
Of course, like for example, you train specific startups on market mapping, and then 5 of those startups start venturing the market in a different approach or using different methodologies, and they start developing their products or services, and they launch and grow. This vary. I mean, you could put a key performance indicator to you, like for example, if you are an incubator or a business development center, 15 out of the MSMEs you are supporting come up with new lines, come up with innovative ideas, generate 30% of revenues on a quarterly basis. So it varies according to the targets that you put for yourself. But again, what I think measures success should be locally acknowledged. I mean, you can never say, for example, I will make $1,000 and it will make me successful. Look at the other competitors, look at your competitive edge, look at the money you already started the business with, and then consider putting realistic targets to actually be able to stand on a very solid ground and say, I've successfully managed to venture the market and generate money, for example.
Okay. Can you also, someone's asked us earlier what level of investment is needed in the results measurement system, the M&E system within the program? Can you give us an idea of Ron, maybe of a sort of overall program?
Yes, I mean we have
commitment to M&E.
Yeah, we have 60 staff, and 41 are technical, and then we have 4 in M&E. So it's about 10% of our technical staff. And then on top of that, I think Iman can talk about what they've done with the partners. Because one thing we've done in
Ron, are you still there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can now.
Okay, sorry. We have a technical staff of 41, and we have 4 in M&E. So it's about 10% of our technical staff. And Iman can talk about what we've done with the partners, because before partners were passive, part of our M&E system. Now she's engaged them more actively. So we actually extend that to the field.
Yeah, like for example, we have more than 55 partners in all across Egypt. We're talking about 11 governors. Just to be fair to the project, yes, some of the partners were very engaged from the beginning. But holistically, when you look at the 55 partners or more, you needed more engagement. Maybe we could have done with less than 4 M&E persons had we had the right system from the very beginning. The manuals, the tools, the processes, how things go, the structure, the workflow is very clear. But because we didn't have that from the beginning of the project, and we started doing that rigorously since we started the restructuring for impact process, that's why we need the labor, and maybe we even need more than 4. But again, as Ron said, I think it takes the same system that you are creating inside. You take that system basically and go out to the partners to be able to collect the right data. You need to explain to the partner, what do we mean by attribution? What do we mean by additionality? What do we mean by generating revenues or not? What do we mean by gross or not? All the definitions that we of the key performance indicators that we work on collecting from partners. We actually share the very definitions that we have developed here in-house with them so that they can actually understand the type of data that we need to capture exactly.
Okay, that's great. Just before I go on, I've got a question up my sleeve that's sort of related. But just before I do that, I'd like to remind everyone that we'd really appreciate your feedback. We've got a very quick feedback form. It'll take you about 20 to 30 seconds to fill in, and a link to it has just been posted on the box. So please, before you go or after you go, do click through and just give us your views on this webinar. So just to go back to what you were saying there, ma'am, and this could be a question for all of you actually. One of the questions that's come through is, are there specific in this process of restructuring the program, were there particular skill sets that you really had to invest in or develop to enable the process to go through? So I'm thinking here about the skill sets of your team.
Yes, of course, the skill set, luckily it's already there, but to change the mentality to accept the new logic chain and to design the intervention in another way, it needed some time, but luckily, as I said, they can absorb the new because they already see the future, that this new system make them see the future and make them see the real impact they are going to work for. And it was difficult in the beginning because they are going to translate this and transform this to our. Can you hear me right now, Mike? Yes. Okay. So to transform to our stakeholders and partners, they need to be fully committed and fully convinced of what they are talking about. So the technical team absorbed it. They needed to only understand the logic which already transformed and by Ron, this knowledge and transferred by Ron through many training sessions. Through practical cases, so it was easy for them to transfer his knowledge into practical interventions that fit the 5 sectors. Although the 5 sectors are totally different from each other and from the mentality of the accepting stakeholders, even the technology, even the design and the industrial intervention are totally different, but it can fit all sectors once the team is convinced, committed, and they see impact, and they can see that the successful future they can transfer to their stakeholders.
And I think what's relevant is that there's really never been a broad-scale market systems development program in Egypt before. So we couldn't do the conventional thing and just, post an ad for a market systems development consultant, because there are none. And what we found was, because most predecessor programming was really direct intervention, a lot of times we bring in people that had done, for example, other USAID projects. They're kind of oriented in the wrong direction. So most of the new people I brought on board came from the private sector. So we've had a chance to bring on somewhere between 6 and 10 new staff since I've been here, and almost all of them come from private sector backgrounds.
Ron, what were the particular competencies that you looked for then in recruiting those people?
I think the main thing is understanding how the private sector operates. Now, one comment I made is that, political economy in Egypt is different than other places I've worked. The government plays a huge role in business. So the government's, probably dominant in most programming. And almost every other donor program targets, government assistance or enabling environment or legislative assistance. Okay, so I found out last week, because we had a visit from the USAID mission director, that basically we're the only program in Egypt that even comes close to touching the street. Almost everything else is up in government assistance or enabling environment approach, and a lot of that never trickles down to the enterprises themselves. So what was I looking for in terms of skills is really the understanding of how the private sector operates within this context. Because I found most people coming from, the public sector programming didn't understand private sector incentives well. And as most practitioners know at this point, successful market systems development, comes from understanding private sector incentives really well. It's not just about the constraints, it's about the incentives that make people do things. So I really look for people that understood how the private sector operates and how economics operate. On top of that, I always look for, the right approach to open attitude, people that are open to learning, highly motivated people, because I tend to delegate a lot just to put people out on the street. So, yeah, just a good understanding of the private sector, highly motivated attitude towards learning.
Okay, thank you, Ron. That's really interesting and quite relevant to the work that we're doing at the moment on creating a competencies framework for market systems development, which is a new feature that you'll find on the Beam Exchange website, where we've tried to identify 17 kind of basic competencies that make up the skills needed in a well-rounded and high-performing market systems development team. So do have a look at that if you get a chance. I have one final question for you, which is about it's more of a discussion point than a question in a way. It's like, could you talk perhaps about how you see the relationship and the differences between impact at a sort of overall economic level and impact at the level of the enterprise? In other words, the results that the individual entrepreneurs get and the benefits that individual entrepreneurs gain from the program.
I'll start that because I can answer it real simply, because the real problem in Egypt, and the reason that USAID is investing in this MSME and entrepreneurship program, is that there's a youth unemployment problem. Since the revolution, there's been a bit of population bulge, and a lot of young people don't have a path to employment. And the employment picture, it's serious for youth. Women in particular are way underemployed here. And it's kind of the upside down than in the U.S. where I'm from. In the U.S., the more education you have, the lower the unemployment rate is. In Egypt, it's the other way around. If you're uneducated and you serve kind of a low-level labor job, you're fully employed. If you have a college degree in this country, there's a 40% unemployment rate. So the overall objective is to get people employed. Now, if you take kind of the economic development approach where all growth is good and eventually it'll help the unemployed get employed, there's no clear link there. And what's happening in Egypt, if you look at, like IMF statistics, if you read the Financial Times, GDP is growing at 5.6%. But at the same time, unemployment's stagnant, and basically the unemployed and the working people are not doing so great. Why? Because most of the investment in Egypt over the last 7 or 8 years has been in low employment, high capital intensive sectors. So the big growth sectors are construction and oil and gas. Okay, both of those are low employers. Oil and gas is one of the lowest employing sectors of any sector in the world, and construction only creates temporary low-skilled jobs in mass. But everything else is suffering. So the difference between kind of general development and MSME or entrepreneurship development is the targeting. So we're not looking at general economic growth that'll eventually hit our target group. We're looking at programming that's targeted from step 1 at small, medium enterprises, entrepreneurs, women and youth. So we've designed everything with a filter. That's the read screen I refer to, where we screen from the top of the intervention for hitting our target. And as you can tell from the sectors we evaluated, potential for employment was one of the largest or heaviest weighted criteria. So if you want to add to that.
Yeah, maybe I will just add to what Ron already said. Maybe looking at impact on terms of enterprises. Of course, this will be measured by, for example, the return on investment or the how many people are employed, new jobs or better jobs provided. But maybe on the bigger economical scheme, I would look at the impact maybe from 3 to 5 years, even after the project ends. We're talking about how many women-owned businesses booming, the socio-economic impact of those enterprises or startups supported. Are they coming up with new innovative ideas that are locally needed, demand-driven? I think this will take more time to measure, but the success of an enterprise, as Ron said, it will be measured by very key factors in terms of impact, but the socio-economic one, one will certainly take time.
Okay, well, Ron, Dalia, Iman, that was fantastic. I see that we're kind of drawing to the hour, so I'm going to wind down now, and with a major thank you for your contributions and also to the questions that everyone put forward. I hope we've covered most of them, but I'm sure Ron or his colleagues would be very happy to receive questions by email and the email addresses that were shown in the previous slide. Perhaps you can go back to that slide while we finish, so that people can make a note of them. All of this, the presentation itself and this webinar has been recorded, and we will make it available on the Beam website very soon. One last please do fill in our evaluation form. It will only take a few seconds, and the link is there in the chat box for you. But otherwise, we wish you the best of luck with the retrofitting of your program, and I hope that the results demonstrate that it was worthwhile. We look forward to hearing all about that, and if you do have results to report, Ron, and anyone else listening to this, please send them to us, because we can link them to your project profile on the Beam program index, and then you have a public face for any results that you want to report. So yes, thank you to everyone. Thank you to Isabel for facilitating this very quietly and competently in the background. And like I say, if you're interested in presenting your own program's work, please get in touch, because we are always interested to showcase the work that people are doing around the world. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you very much.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.